Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I'm your host, Darla Ledoux. I'm here with Tyler Gines. We're so excited to go on this journey with you today and talk about animal medicine. And I know there are people listening, Tyler, who are like, oh my gosh, he's like speaking to my soul. And then there are people who are like, what's that? I don't get it. So, first, just tell people a little bit about who you are and how you got into this world of helping people with their energetic alignment and really being true to who they are.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Darla. I'm so excited to be here on Activating Magic, especially because it's a journey of activating your own magic. So, my journey kind of started in kind of an unfortunate way. Um, I had subtle signs from the universe to pay attention and kind of tap back into my spirituality because I dabbled in and out of it after I left religion. And I worked in real estate, and one of my clients was like, oh, do a vision board. So one year I created a vision board and put French bulldogs on there. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is magical. I'm so excited. 2 weeks later, my friend's like, hey, there's two French bulldogs that need to be rescued. Do you want them? And I've never said yes so fast in my life.
And that friend had no idea this was on your vision board.
She did. She actually had a Frenchie, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want a Frenchie so bad. They're so cute. They're out of this world. They're very magical. They're very magical creatures, actually. Kind of out of this world, but so am I. So what more can you ask for, right? So we go on a journey to Colorado and pick and rescue these dogs up. And all of a sudden, I always say who rescued who, because I rescued them, but they really rescued me. And fast forward a couple years, and I was out of town, and Stella, one of my rescues, actually ran away from the dog sitter and was unfortunately hit and killed by a car. And then a year later, I didn't realize what kind of an impact that had because of all of the grief that I was suffering with. Or I don't know if I'd say suffering even, but I was carrying massive amounts of grief and feeling massive grief. The February before her death anniversary, I got an email that said Australia is 90,000 sky miles, super cheap, and it's a place that I've wanted to visit. Now they had been closed because of COVID, so I jumped on it. That second week, I had completely unplanned, no idea where I was going, what I was doing, where I was staying. I realized, oh my gosh, this is over Stella's death anniversary. And so that second week, I found myself in Byron Bay, one of the most incredibly spiritual places here on earth, next to Ubud, Bali. And on the day of her anniversary, I was on a walk, and I was on the easterlymost point of the mainland of Australia. And I had been crying and crying. Now, mind you, the day before I was on this walk, I did breath work and processed a lot of the grief. Then on this walk, I was like, oh my gosh, I am so sad. I miss her. Like, going through that, nobody can prepare you for that. And I asked her to send me a sign. And out comes an Australian water dragon. And it makes sure that it perches right on a rock, looks straight at me. And in that moment, the Australian water dragon is really bringing peace where there once was war. So there was a lot of war within my heart, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and a lot of grief. And so being able to bring this Australian water dragon to me, I realized, oh my gosh, there's signs and synchronicities in everything. Before she had been hit by a car, I was actually doing 75 hard with one of my friends. And in the middle of the city, there was an owl hooting. I had no idea what that all was about until obviously now. And when I snapped a picture with this owl, there was a green orb that was right in front of it, or right above it.
Mm.
The signs and synchronicities are always there, but it really unfortunately took me losing my dog to fully dive into
Mm.
my spirituality and my energetic body. I was supposed to actually be in a Reiki course right before I was going to Australia, and the Reiki master broke her foot. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, there's obviously a reason for that.
Mm.
I get home from Australia and I then am in the Reiki course, and I was like, okay, I understand why she broke her foot, because I needed to go to Australia, move through the grief, because it only
Mm.
made the energy so much more powerful.
Mm.
So this little creature who was hit by a car had massive, beautiful plans for me. I didn't realize it until
Yeah.
actually 2024, what the universe was transpiring, trying to get me to see. And
Mm.
that's how we ended
Well,
up
let me
in this.
ask some questions before we go to 2024, because
Yeah.
first of all, coincidence, I don't know, but my friend with a Frenchie is in town visiting and was at my house last night, and her dog and my dog were playing. So I'm I'm just going to ask about that. They're magical creatures. What is an Australian water dragon?
Oh, that's a great question. So I thought it was a crocodile at first, but a very small one. I thought it was a baby. It looks like a crocodile, chameleon, not chameleon, not iguana. I was like, what is the animal? An iguana. It's got a long tail, and they're very mystical creatures, which is super fascinating. I had never seen one, but I asked the breathwork facilitator, and she's like, that's an Australian water dragon. And I was like, okay. So me being who I am, I Googled it and I was like, what does this mean? And they're seriously some of the prettiest creatures because they do bring such a
Mm,
healing energy to them.
awesome. I'm definitely going to Google this after. I can't wait. So
Love it.
I'm a total dog lover. When my dog passed, I was a wreck for so long, and he was old. So I can imagine the grief and, whatever that was like with the pet sitter and all of that. And so now you have this perspective of this all unfolded for me. This happened for a reason. And I'm sure there's people listening who are like, oh, yeah, those kind of things happen all the time for me. Someone broke their foot and now I went, and did this thing. And then there are people who are thinking, I don't get it. So if we think of Stella and what she brought to you, like how would you translate that to someone who maybe isn't following the signs yet? They're just starting to consider that they have magic.
Totally. So before I got Paris and Stella, um, I was focused on partying. I was all about sex, drugs, and EDM. Like to be
Mm.
completely vulnerable, like it was just I'd left a religion that was very restrictive to me that I didn't feel like I aligned to. So I flew off the deep end. And it was Pride weekend of 2018, so just a few short months before I got Paris and Stella, that I realized I'm either going to end up dead in a ditch because I became addicted to drugs, or I'm going to focus on my career and I'm going to pull my shit together. And
Mm.
it was that Pride weekend that I actually had something laced with meth.
Mm.
And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, that weekend, oh my gosh, even. And so when I rescued Paris and Stella, they pulled me out of some deep, dark
Mm.
depression. I don't know how they did it, but it was now I had to shift my
Mm.
responsibilities. I had to shift my focus. I was home more because I knew that they needed me. And again, I rescued them from a breeding farm, and they were shy at first because they were rescues. They'd been abused. And I remember when I brought them home, I was like, this is the wrong decision. What am I doing? Like
Mm.
so much chaos. But they both brought this unique gift, and they planted a seed of curiosity and exploration. I started to meditate with them. I started to just explore like the magic that they bring, because I mean, you've experienced a Frenchie and they're so off the wall weird. Their personalities are so strange, and they're just, I do think that they're almost being controlled by an alien, kind of like a bird. And so having them in my home, it really started to unlock and fertilize a seed. And then when I lost her so tragically, it was like, oh, there's a lesson to be learned in everything, but I need to go inward and I have to discover my own magic.
Mm.
And because of the out of this world creature that I now am homing, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not of this world. Like I asked myself that question, and
Wow.
there's times that it's like, that feels kind of weird to be saying, but maybe I'm really not. Maybe I'm really truly here to help others heal and unlock their own magical gifts and heal
Mm.
and give them permission to be their out of this world weird.
Mm. That's beautiful. You know, I always ask at the end, what message would you have for someone who's kind of their magic is coming online and nobody around them has that going on and they feel crazy? I feel like now is a good time to talk about that because, for me, I grew up in a town of 500. I do identify as queer. I was married to a woman for a decade. Um, I am a, coach, healer. My family has no idea what I do for a living. They never ask. They're just like, oh, she's just doing something. Who knows? And when I started to feel my intuitive gifts coming online, I never told anybody. Like I started making decisions, trusting it, but I didn't tell anybody like what my inner process was because I'm like, they're going to think I'm crazy. Oh, your car swerved on the road and you decided to cash out your retirement and get a life coach certification? Sure. So imagining you've had a lot of that kind of experience too, of like, okay, what is Tyler up to? Um, and maybe when
Yep.
you were in the religion still and maybe getting out. So what would you say to someone who's kind of like the weird one in their community or their family and they're trying to find their path?
So this goes back to the 2024 thing, but it's just too funny not to share. When I first fully accepted like this whole animal medicine shaman guy that I am, I literally was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm coming out of the closet all freaking over again. I feel so weird. I feel so crazy. You know what? Just go with it. Be weird. Who cares? I'm a manifesting generator in human design,
Mm.
so I'm always starting something new. I'm always interested in something different. I just follow what lights me up. And at one
Mhm.
point it was Reiki, and then I just knew I needed to put it on the shelf. And then it was all of a sudden I'm investing $100,000 in personal development to now become a certified neurolinguistic programming trainer. Put that on the shelf, and I'm just like, what do I want to do next? Because I know that they're all very bits and pieces of where I'm going and what I'm supposed to create to bring
Mhm.
to this world a powerful magical modality. And that's just what I'm here to do, is help
Mhm.
create, inspire, and move fast. So my message to all of you is listen to your heart, be weird, be your weird self, and enjoy it. Enjoy being weird. Who
Yeah.
cares what other people think?
How has it been not caring what other people think?
It's been, at first I was like, oh, I'm a little leery about this, not sure what people are going to think.
Mhm.
And then I just finally got to a point where I said, no, I believe in this power. I believe that this magic is here for a reason, that I have this gift and I'm supposed to share it with the world. So now I look at it, I'm like, I don't really care. Like the other day, I actually did a video about how before my workshop I needed an animal, and I got praying mantis. let the energy enter the room. And the next day, I realized on the oracle card that I also pulled had a praying mantis on it. And then that night, I was like, who the hell cares what I talk about? I'm going to go talk about animal medicine. And it's just had the full download. So when you trust in yourself and allow that intuitive hit to happen, things happen fast and it's so incredible to watch. So just do it.
I love that. Things happen fast. It's like we may not be ready sometimes for how quickly life can transform.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it can literally happen overnight or while you're out of town and have your dog ripped away and your complete life is completely flipped upside down. But was it really flipped upside down? Because my life now is like, I just got goosebumps as I said that. Like, she's been orchestrating so many beautiful things in my life, her and Paris both. So life happens fast.
Yeah.
Are you willing to answer the call?
Yeah. You know, I call that a sourced experience in my training, when something shows up that like creates this contrast, but it gets your attention and it makes you pay attention and it makes you willing to show up in a different energy, because the old way, like you can't hold on to the old way. Like
Totally.
Ella's gone and now I have to respond to that in some way. And I'm either going to go up or down. Yeah.
Exactly
So
that.
buckle up.
Right? Fasten in. It's a bumpy ride sometimes, but worth it. I promise.
Exactly. So I want to share this story. And then I want to ask your story. I had a client once, this was a while ago, and it was before I was talking about magic, before I was really even that out as being spiritual or intuitive. And I had this client who disclosed to me kind of like secretly that she would talk to people and she'd get animals and colors. Like she'd just be talking to someone and there'd be a purple elephant or whatever. Like it was always a color. And she told me mine was orange crow. She made me an artwork of it. But we're at this retreat and I'm like, okay, well, that's great. Like, can we build a business on that? Like, let me sit with that. And we were traveling and I was out running in the morning, and a bird dive bombed my head and a snake went right across the trail, like right in front of me. And I'm like, okay, you can't make this up. Like, I think this woman needs to do something with this, right? So she's gone on, she has all, 3 animal oracle decks and she uses it. She came out to her family about their animals because they were speaking to her and she didn't know what to do. So anyway, it was amazing. It's been amazing to watch her, just embrace that gift. So I know you shared this with me when we met, but talk a little bit about how animals started coming to you, and were you just like, okay, bring it on, or were you rejecting of that gift at all?
So, I mean, I'm getting like all giddy, like a little kid in a candy shop because I love this. So, we were in Bali for a spiritual retreat in December. And we went early because I have a friend that is a shaman, and I used to work with her while she was in real estate here. And we were in the Lumerian stone chamber. And this Lumerian stone chamber, these stones are so big that you can lay on them, like the size of cars. And I'm laying on petrified wood, which is all about letting go of negative emotions, past grief, traumas, whatever. And I'm laying on this wood, and I know that like Stella's there. I have to process more grief because unfortunately grief never goes away. You just grow with it. And so I had this layer that I had to work through. And all of a sudden Paris shows up as well, and they help process. And this rock is literally like enclosing on me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so powerful. After I work through what I needed to work through, I know when I've had an energy shift because I get so giggly, like a little kid on Christmas morning that is so excited. And I start giggling, and all of a sudden I see this lizard up in the roof of this Lumerian stone chamber. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I have a bond with this lizard. Not like, okay. And before we had gone to Bali, my friend was like, ayahuasca was appearing, and I was like, okay, I think I want to do ayahuasca. So I was
Mm,
asking her, and she's like, well, do you want to serve that? I think you're more of a medicine man. And I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense because I wanted to be a doctor growing up and all of these different things.
mm,
In this stone chamber, I go in and it literally reads your energy through stones, and the music shifts to medicine man music.
mm,
So I am laying there and there's this lizard, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I understand. You're delivering medicine to me. That's why I
mm,
have my little gecko right here. In that moment, lizards are all about infinite renewal, being able to heal
mm,
past things, and the it was so profound because I let go of 26 lifetimes of grief on this rock, this petrified wood,
mm,
and there's a lizard giving me the medicine.
mm,
And in that moment, I was like, oh, every time I've seen an animal, it's been giving me the medicine because I always look up those signs and synchronicities like, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? Now I was like, oh, I've always had that inside of me. I didn't need to go and Google it, and
yeah.
I can pull it and channel it. I'm like, here's your animal. And they're like, that was so spot on. That was so creepy. But okay. So did I reject it at first? I'm sure I did before I was aware. And then on that stone, I was like, oh, because the next morning I was like, I need to open an animal medicine vortex. In 6 months, didn't really know what that looked like. Ended up doing a water blessing that afternoon in holy water of Bali, and Mama Bali actually gave me the animal medicine vortex. And that animal medicine vortex has brought animal communication in. It's brought the energetics of animal medicine. So it's like all of these profound things. And this is why I said I felt like I was coming out of the closet all over again because
Yeah.
people are going to think you're a kook. You think animals give you medicine? I'm like, no, they absolutely do.
Mm, yeah. When you, I kind of want to go back, and I'm going to weave this throughout. It's like one of my purposes, I believe, is to help people trust when they're getting information that seems like it doesn't make sense, but yet they know what it means, right? So I've helped so many people connect into their guidance, and they're like, well, I had a thought about this, is that like, but that just is my brain. And it's like, well, maybe you thought about that because that's guidance, right? Like, so when you said Stella was there and Paris was there, and so Stella's crossed over. Paris, I assume, is still on this plane.
No, she's crossed over as
Oh, so they're
well.
both okay.
They're
Like,
both
how did you know they
facilitating.
were there?
So I knew Stella would come just because it was all about the grief. And then my friend was like, there's another one here. I'm like, oh, Paris came. And she's
Mm.
like, yeah, and she shared she's fancy. I was like, oh. So they both wanted to be there to support me because I know that I rescued them and they rescued me, but they wanted to be able to help me support
Mhm.
me into a deeper transformation. And I totally believe that. So it's almost like a knowing
Mhm.
or a feeling that they're there. And they appear in the most random ways. Like I had somebody that had the first name Stella, and then she lived in France, show
Mm.
up on one of my free opt-ins. And I was like, they show up in the most unique ways, and it's so
Mhm.
freaking cool. So that
Mm.
knowing at first is like, wait, is this it? Is this not it? And it's like, you know what? Just trust in that. So that's beautiful that
Yeah.
that's your purpose.
Just trust in that. Is that I feel like that's solid advice. Is like trust it and see what happens.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
even though sometimes it's a little scary to do the trust. It's like, ooh, because we're conditioned not to trust. We've
Mm,
all been given a reason not to trust
mm.
in our life.
Yeah, say more about that.
Growing up, it's you're not supposed to trust yourself, and or in the religion, you're not supposed to trust any voices. It's like it's guidance from spiritual realms, and you're not supposed to be gifted. I've had, like, my parents went through a nasty divorce, and I was unfortunately abused as a
Mm,
scapegoat to pin it on one or the other. And I'm not placing blame. It is what it is, and it's made me who I am today. But we all have a reason not to trust someone, something, because
mhm.
something happened and we're
Yeah,
conditioned and programmed. And all of a sudden, it's like all trust goes out the window. And now you have to learn what that word even means
yeah,
all over again.
yeah. Ooh, let's use that as a springboard into the animal medicine. So, I've been a recipient of your gift. I've watched you kind of tune into other people. And so there's a process of connecting, I'm assuming, to this vortex, and it comes through. If we think of, we all have a reason not to trust, how can someone's animal build trust?
It's a great question. So each animal carries a unique healing energy. And I will give you the animal that I think you need in that very moment. You might look at me like I have four eyes, but I'll also tell you the messages that it has. And every single time I've done that, because I've tuned into your energy and it's like, oh, here's the animal you need, it pops up and I'm like, oh, okay, here's what it needs. Now I'll go through and say things, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is a word that they need to know. And all of a sudden they're like, that is so spot on for what's happening in my life.
Wow. So if we can use me if you want. So you gave me koala,
Yes.
right? And I told you I Googled it and wrote down all the words around it. And I didn't write down the words you gave me in the moment. But so it was specifically around, my business, since we were on a business retreat. How would you recommend I work with that?
That's a great question. So, obviously, when you like have a challenge appear, or maybe you're not feeling happy about a turnout in a certain event, like a webinar or a workshop, or maybe that sales call didn't go very well as you would hope. It's when you take in and you call in that energy, you're like, just okay, koala bear, I know right now this is the energy I need.
Mm.
And again, animals, like for you right now, I'm actually getting a hummingbird. It's like I'm
Mm.
like, oh, it's a hummingbird this time. So it depends really on what is
The
happening.
situation.
Yeah. And like where your current energetic
Mm.
field is. So it's never, I mean, it could be the same animal, but it also may not.
Mm. So what would that say about my energetic if it's hummingbird now and koala before?
So hummingbirds are very much, they're small, but they're so mighty and they're so powerful. So I
Mm.
think obviously right now it is the energy that we're in, because you're having a podcast that as people listen to this, their frequency gets upgraded. Their the people are sharing their vulnerability, they're sharing their stories, they're sharing their magic. And I don't know if you've ever seen a hummingbird and not been like, oh, just a hummingbird. You look at a hummingbird and you're like, their wings are moving so fast, they're so powerful,
Yeah.
and like the way they can adapt to their surroundings. And I don't know if you know this, but hummingbirds actually lay eggs that are the size of jelly beans,
No, I
and
did
their nests
not.
are so tiny, but they bring such a powerful energy to your awareness.
Mm. I love that. I had a season of hummingbird. Um, it was, gosh, probably 7 or so years ago. And there was a lot around presence and being, you know, how they come and stare at you,
Mhm.
like, and then they just jump away and then they come and they stare at you. So I love that you're bringing that up.
Yeah. And that's what's so, I mean, because again, it's so different. And there's obviously like I can give you the energy and you can use it, but being able to totally fully integrate it, like I have a full-blown healing process that I take you
Mm.
through that helps you actually deepen that connection in that moment, which is so cool.
Mm. Talk more about that. Talk more about your process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I obviously channel the energy for you and the animal. And then I walk you into a grounding meditation and we have some fun, obviously. And then I as you ground and connect, then all of a sudden I walk you into a hypnosis. And I have you
Mm.
pull up the animal I've given you. And while you're doing that, I'm doing energy work on you, but you're actually talking to your animal, asking it questions.
Mm.
And when you do that, you build this relationship with this animal. And you can ask it, like, okay, why are you showing up in this point in my life? Or what, like, for what do I need you in the future for? Like, how can you help me?
Mm.
So you're like going through this full blown, like, incredible connection experience. And at the same time, like, I'm raising your energetic vibration in the moments of doing the energy work.
What are some things that, like, you know, you said, what do I need to know in the future? How can I use you? What are some things people have received from that?
So it's how can I, like, I worked with this CEO who was not willing to get out of their own way. And I was coaching him, and literally outside the window was a hawk. And it's all
Mm.
about the higher perspective and the higher vision.
Mm.
And when I channeled that, I'm like, just let it embrace you. They were able to get out of their own way and start creating from that higher vision of love.
Mm.
So you can say, like, how might you show up in the future? And they're like, okay, they, have the answers. And then you're like, oh, right now, for me, like, for my own personal, praying mantis is super prominent. And that's all about my spirituality and being grounded. And so right now, I know I
Mm.
need to create more of a spiritual based business. So I'm really utilizing that
Mm.
energy for myself.
Mhm. Wonderful. When you say get out of their own way with the reference to the CEO, if someone's listening, how do they know if they're not willing to get out of their own way?
Resistance. Are you burnt out, exhausted, anxious all the time?
Mm.
Odds are you're standing in your own way, and you're like, it's because it's a safety blanket and
Mm.
there's no blame or shame. But if you're standing in your own way and sometimes you have to mow yourself over. Like, there's a version of you that's waiting to
Mm.
step out from behind the current version of you, but your current version is being a giant
Mm.
pain in the ass and standing right
Yeah.
there.
Well, so many people are burnt out and exhausted, right?
Yeah. So what do you
Yeah.
need to break through in order to get out of your way for that next level?
Yeah. One of the things I talk a lot about is commitment and how, I don't know about you, but it's interesting because so many of my connections now are in this world. Most of my friends are magical and like immediately can have deeper conversations. But I remember as I was starting out, having a lot of conversations where people are stuck and exhausted and stressed and maybe complaining about the same thing over and over and over, but really not wanting to change it. Like there's a comfort there somehow. And so I talk a lot about commitment and helping people find their commitment to actually transforming. What's been your experience with helping people get ready to get out of their own way?
So it depends on how much resistance shows up. Because there's resistance at every level and every up level as well. And I know that that's just a key part of transformation. There's obviously sometimes you have to put in a little extra work because they're not willing to shift it. But then it's like we find that small little piece or crack in the
Mm.
armor or the rock, however that wants to show up. We find the small little crack and then we explore that. And then I help you bridge the gap and crack it open more so you can see what's
Mm.
possible in that next one. So if they're facing that resistance, sometimes it's going to take a couple of times just sitting down and talking, very surface level things. But then once you find that small little crack, you're like, okay.
Mm.
And most of the time, it's the whole vulnerability thing because, vulnerability can be scary at times, but it's what's on the other side of that vulnerability is so powerful and really your own
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah. Have you ever had an experience where you didn't want to be vulnerable? You
Of
didn't want to go
course, I've
there?
had plenty of those experiences. Those ones, there's so my favorite one was when well, actually, I'll use the marketers cruise,
Mm.
that networking. At first, I was terrified to be vulnerable about sharing the animal medicine as like a conversation starter, being
Mm.
like, hey, because that's something in front of a lot of business owners. Not a lot of business owners are fully aware that that's
Yeah.
a thing. And so at first I was like, I don't really want to do this because what are people going to think of me? But then it's like, logically, I wanted to say other things.
Mm.
My soul didn't want to say the things my head wanted to say. And so being able to tune into that, it's like, I get that being vulnerable is scary. And if you can just acknowledge the emotion that's attached to it, it typically is like,
Mm.
okay, cool, I can sink into it. And then it's like, then you start to walk through, well, where is this terror coming from? What's the event that started it? And then I got up there and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to tell you some weird shit off the wall that you're going to be like, what? But so many
Mm.
people
Yeah.
found it so cool and so powerful. And the people that received it were like, whoa, that's so on par for it. So that actually allowed me, that was a step in the next step for me to get out of my own way and talk about the animal medicine and being willing to
Yeah.
share it.
Yeah. That's such a good example. And so for people who weren't there, we each had 30 seconds to stand in front of the room and share what we do. And your share definitely stood out to me.
Thank you.
And, obviously I have this podcast, I believe in magic. And yeah, it's interesting. So often people are reworking their messaging and reworking their messaging and their offers and like, will anybody buy this? And if someone's, I've seen this so many times with clients, if their energy is like, oh no, this is crazy and nobody's going to listen, they'll go say it to someone and everybody will want to correct them. Like, I'm sure you've seen that.
Yep.
Like, oh, you can't sell that, or you need to change it to be like this. And and it's like, well, first of all, who's the audience? But then when we shift in alignment and we say it from that place, nobody questions. I know I've said the same thing from like insecurity versus alignment, and it lands totally differently.
Totally.
So, when you're doing something that's a little different, that's more in the magical realm, that alignment is so key because your energy is selling that this is either a real thing or it's crazy,
Totally.
and your energy is selling that.
Completely. And it's so funny that we're talking about this right now because again, like I did that workshop called the praying mantis. I didn't have the turnout I wanted. And I was throwing a tantrum. My little inner child was out to play and throwing a tantrum.
Mm.
And then I'm a person that loves baths. Like I can sit in I was in the bathtub for 3 hours and I had this idea. I was like, oh, let's create a landing page for hypnosis, like a hypnosis session. Then I was like, oh, let's do one for Reiki. And I was like, oh my gosh, let's do one for chakra readings. And then all of a sudden, psychic medium readings. And then all of a sudden, animal medicine. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, I'm going to do all of my own messaging around animal medicine. And it downloaded. I had
Mm.
stage talk completely written
Mm.
and then fine tuned within 48 hours, used to stress
Mm.
and dread it. And then all of a sudden it was like I had all of these downloads for a sales funnel. And I was like, oh my gosh, the alignment, when you
Yeah,
step into it, it's like, bam.
totally. I love that. Yeah. And in the times when it's not clear, take a bath, go for a hike,
Yes.
get in nature,
Yep.
like, give yourself the space. I have that happen all the time. Something gets clear and it happens very fast, but it might have taken a while.
Right. That resistance, if you show up
Mhm.
and resist it, it's going to take longer. And then all of a sudden you're like,
Yeah.
there's that one little intuitive hit that you're like, oh, I was resisting that. Let's see what happens. And then one thing leads to the next, to the next, to the next. And you're like, whoa, powerful.
Yes. Such a good example. So you have a gift where people get to experience this. Can you talk a little bit about this session, the
Yes,
wild
absolutely.
wisdom?
I would love it. So, what a wild wisdom reading is where I tune into your energetic field and you will receive a the animal you need for that very moment, and whatever's happening in life. You're going to be able to gain insight into the energy and the healing that it can bring forth. I know you've mentioned that when I gave you the koala bear, I'd love to actually hear like the different things and
Mm,
how it applied into your life.
yeah. Well, let me read some of what I captured. Exuding delightfulness, which delightful was has been one of my, I call them sourced energy words, like the energy we're living into in this season. And delightful is one of my words. So that was the first thing. It said a very chill creature with very low stress, perpetually at peace with itself and its surroundings. And your presence changes the dynamic. You offer stability with no strings attached. And I mean, that feels very true. A shaman who uses natural gifts to improve daily existence, earth element, maternal, life giving energy. Oh, and there was this piece of remembering of the time before time, which
Wow.
I feel like that's so fascinating that koalas remember the time before time. I don't know how people know this, but carrying a genetic memory of our ancestors. So I
Wow.
found that super fascinating. For me, being on the marketers cruise, I'm sensitive. Besides there being 450 marketers, there's 4,000 humans,
Yep.
and it was a little overwhelming. So for me, it was like, oh yeah, just like get over that. Like I am very chill. I hold a grounded space. Like if people step into it, they know that. And if they don't, that's okay. Like if people are out, come to my workshop, come to my work. Like that's just never going to be me. And I had a whole process of accepting that during the cruise and like, oh yeah, that's just really not me. I'm going to deepen the friendships. I'm going to meet some new amazing people, but I'm not going to run around all over trying to, make sure I don't miss anything. So
Totally.
that's how I interpreted it.
Wow. Well, and even for like the koala, if you're getting stressed in work or business or life, like You can be like, yo, koala, where you at though, bro? Like, come wrap me up and help me calm down.
Right.
Because they really, I mean, I've held one and they are the cutest creatures. So
Mm,
truly, like having that animal and being able to bring in that energy really allows you to
yeah.
feel seen, validated, and completely support, like that you are completely supported. And knowing that the universe is guiding you
Yeah.
through those synchronicities. And that's exactly what you get through the wild wisdom reading. So if you want to be like Darla and have a cool experience with an animal where she's like, oh
Yes.
my gosh, this is so cool. You know, you're going to be able to get over the disconnection and the self doubt and really start to tune into that again. You're going to be able to realize that the overwhelm that you're feeling about prioritizing your time is really that you don't have to waste it on doubt or confusion.
Mm,
You're going to be able to have
yeah.
the animal there. And then like it's a whole process where it's the wild wisdom transmission. Like I tune in and
Mhm.
then I channel it as I reveal it. And how can you align moving forward? So that's where the animal reading or the wild wisdom
Yeah.
reading came from, is so you can have an experience like Darla and me and so many other people that are like, holy shit, this is powerful.
Right. And I think about our other friend who had an insect and was so distressed about being an insect. But when I heard what it meant, to me, it made perfect sense. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's the great symbol of resistance with an animal. And then all of a sudden, the next day, they were talking about grasshoppers on the stage. Yep, because you needed it.
It's wild. The Yeah, I just, to use that example, one of the messages was about ancestors and working with ancestral wisdom. And maybe I can see it because this koala thing, but you know, she had said like, oh yeah, I never want to go there. I don't want to look at that. I don't even like my ancestry. It's like, yeah, that's message feels really timely. So
Can't make it
it's
up.
time. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Anything you want to leave people with?
Just show up and be your magical self. The world really does need more magical people, and we all have all these different magical tools and our own different unique
Yeah.
magic. And you do deserve to show the world those that magic. And I would
Mm.
love to be able to connect and help people uncover that as well, because magic is really what raises the vibration of the world, and we need that more than ever right now.
Yeah, we do. Thank you, Tyler. I so
Yes, thank
appreciate
you.
you. Thanks for your work in the world. And thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for tuning in to Activating Magic. I'm your host, Darla Ledoux, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.